Okay, let's time travel for a second. I want you to picture California at the absolute turn of the millennium. It's the year 2000.
A very specific vibe, yeah.
Right. The dot-com bubble hasn't quite burst yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's leaking a little, maybe. But the optimism is still just off the charts.
Oh, completely.
You've got pets.com, sock puppets on TV. People are becoming millionaires overnight in Silicon Valley. California isn't just a state. It's like the engine of the entire world.
It really was. I mean, if California were a country in the year 2000, it would have been the 5th largest economy on the planet.
Wow.
Bigger than France, bigger than Italy. It was the absolute golden child of the global economy.
Exactly. It's the home of the future. High tech, high growth, high hopes. But then you go home after a long day at your startup, you flip the light switch.
And nothing.
And nothing happens.
Yeah, it's silence.
The lights don't turn on. The traffic lights outside are dark. People are getting stuck in elevators.
Manufacturing lines that are supposed to be building that future just grind to a halt. The entire grid crumbles.
It sounds like the plot of a dystopian novel, honestly.
Or a post-apocalyptic movie. But for millions of people, this was just a Tuesday.
So today we are doing a deep dive into the 2000-2001 California electricity crisis. Sometimes it's called the Western U.S. energy crisis.
Right.
And we have pulled a massive stack of source material for this. We've got government reports from FERC, historical records, media coverage from the time, and some truly wild transcripts from inside the energy trading floors.
And the mission here is really to solve a mystery. Because on paper, this just shouldn't have happened.
That's the thing that gets me. I mean, we aren't talking about a developing country with crumbling infrastructure. We are talking about the richest state in the richest country on earth.
Yeah.
How does a place like that just run out of power?
Well, that was the narrative at the time, right? We ran out, or everyone turned on their hairdryers at once.
Yeah.
But when you actually dig into these documents, you realize that running out wasn't really the problem.
It was something much more sinister.
It was a perfect storm. It was this mix of good intentions gone wrong, some genuinely bad luck with the weather, and then, waiting in the wings, some of the most ruthless corporate greed we have ever seen in modern history.
We're talking about a crisis that caused an 800% spike in wholesale electricity prices. 800%.
It's just an insane number.
It bankrupted Pacific Gas and Electric, which is a massive utility. And it cost the state somewhere between $40 and $45 billion.
That number is hard to even wrap your head around. $45 billion essentially just evaporated from the California economy.
So buckle up. We're going to unpack how this happened, who the villains were, and there are definitely villains, and why the lights finally came back on. But to understand the collapse, we have to understand the setup. We have to go back to 1996.
The year of the Macarena.
And the year of deregulation. So set the stage for us. What was happening in the California state legislature in 1996?
Well, the mood was, and this is important to remember, it was bipartisan optimism. This wasn't one party shoving something down the other's throat.
Okay.
You had Democratic State Senator Steve Peace, who is often called the father of deregulation, and you had Republican Senator Jim Brulte. They were working together with a Republican governor, Pete Wilson.
And what was the problem they were trying to solve? Like, why mess with the electricity system at all?
The argument was that California's energy prices were too high. Industrial companies, factories, big businesses, they were complaining. They were saying, look, we pay way more for power here than they do in other states. It's hurting our competitiveness.
And the solution they came up with was the free market.
Exactly. The prevailing economic theory of the 90s was that monopolies are bad and competition is good. Up until this point, utilities like PG&E were monopolies. They owned the power plants, they owned the wires, and they sent you the bill. The government told them what they could charge. It was boring, stable, but maybe a little inefficient.
So the politicians thought, hey, if we break up the monopoly and let companies compete to sell electricity, prices will go down.
It's Economics 101. If you have 10 people trying to sell you lemons, the price of lemons should drop. So they passed Assembly Bill 1890.
AB 1890, the legislation that launched 1,000 lawsuits.
And it passed unanimously in the Senate. Unanimously. Everyone thought they were geniuses. The goal was to lower energy costs. But, and here's the massive but, they didn't actually create a free market.
They created a partial deregulation.
Right. And this is the fatal flaw. I mean, if you take nothing else away from this deep dive, you have to understand this mechanism. They called it the market design, but in hindsight, it looks more like a bear trap.
Okay, so let's break it down. But there are two markets here. Wholesale and retail.
Correct. So the wholesale market is where the utilities, PGE, Southern California Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, buy the actual electricity. They buy it from the power plants. The legislation deregulated this side.
Meaning the price could float.
Totally uncapped, based purely on supply and demand. If it's a hot day and power is scarce, the generators can charge whatever they want.
Okay, so that's the wholesale side. What are the retail market?
That's you and me. That's the bill that comes to your house every month. The politicians were terrified that voters would get mad if their bills fluctuated wildly, so they kept the retail market heavily regulated.
They capped the price.
They froze it.
Wait, I want to make sure I'm hearing this right. The utilities were forced by law to buy electricity on an open market where prices could go to the moon. But they were forbidden by law from raising the prices they charged their customers.
That is exactly it. That's the squeeze.
That just sounds, okay, let's use the analogy. The source material mentions the lemonade stand concept.
It's the best way to visualize it. So imagine you run a lemonade stand. The government passes a law that says you must sell every glass of lemonade for exactly $1. You cannot charge a penny more.
Okay, I can live with that as long as lemons are cheap.
Right. And for a while, lemons cost you 50 cents. You buy a lemon for 50 cents, make juice, sell it for $1. You make a 50-cent profit. Everyone's happy.
But then something happens to the lemons.
Right. The price of lemons goes up. Maybe there's a drought, a shortage. Suddenly, the lemon farmer tells you, hey, lemons are $10 now.
But I still have to sell the juice for $1.
By law, you are a public utility. You have an obligation to serve. You can't just close up the stand. So for every single glass you hand over the counter, you are losing $9.
That is a recipe for instant bankruptcy. I don't get it. Why on earth did the utilities agree to this? PG&E had lawyers. They must have seen this coming.
You would think so. But they made a gamble. There was this issue called stranded costs.
Stranded costs?
Basically, the utilities had made some bad investments in the past, mostly on these really expensive nuclear plants, and they wanted the state to help them pay those off.
Oh.
So the deal was basically, we accept the price cap for a few years, and in exchange, you let us add a surcharge to everyone's bill to pay off our old debt.
So they bet that wholesale prices would stay low.
They bet the house on it. They looked at the historical trends and thought, power is cheap. It's going to stay cheap. We'll pocket the difference and pay off our debts, no problem.
And for a couple of years, from 96 to 99, it looked like they were right.
No, it worked perfectly. Until, of course, it didn't.
Which brings us to Section 2, the perfect storm. Because you can set a trap, but someone or something still has to step into it.
Exactly. And before we even get to the Enron traders and the criminal stuff, we have to look at the boring physical realities of the grid in the year 2000, because the system was already redlining.
Yeah, I was looking at the population stats in the notes, and it's staggering.
Yeah.
California grew by 13% in the 1990s.
That's millions of people. And not just people, tech people. This was the dot-com boom.
Right.
Server farms were popping up everywhere. People were buying computers, massive monitors, air conditioners. I mean, the whole economy was on fire.
Retail sales of electricity went up by 11% in that same decade. So demand is just skyrocketing.
And in a normal functioning market, when demand goes up, what happens to supply?
You build more supply, you build more power plants.
You would think. But in the entire decade of the 1990s, California built 0 major new power plants. 0. Effectively 0. In fact, the generation capacity of the state actually decreased by 2% during the 90s.
Wait, how does capacity go down? You don't just lose a power plant.
Well, old plants get retired. Environmental regulations get stricter, so some of the dirtier plants get shut down. And honestly, because of all the deregulation talks, investors were scared. Nobody wanted to spend $500 million building a new plant when they didn't know what the rules of the game were going to be in 5 years, so they just didn't.
So you have a booming population, hungry for power, and a shrinking fleet of power plants.
Yeah.
That is not a good combination.
It's a tightrope walk. And then nature decided to just shove them off the rope.
The weather.
The weather. Specifically, a drought in the Pacific Northwest.
I think a lot of people, they don't realize how interconnected the grid is. California doesn't just make its own power. It imports a ton of it.
It's huge. In the summer, California relies on hydroelectric power from Oregon and Washington.
Right, from the big dams.
The Columbia River dams. It's usually cheap, it's clean, and it's abundant. It's their safety net.
But in 2000, it stopped raining up there.
The water levels just plummeted. The dams couldn't generate the excess power. So the Pacific Northwest basically said, sorry, California, we need this power for ourselves. We can't send you any.
So the safety net is gone. California has to generate its own power, and most of their local plants ran on natural gas.
And here is the second punch from Mother Nature. The price of natural gas spiked at the exact same time. It went from about $2 per million BTU to over $10.
A five-fold increase in the fuel cost.
Right. So even if there was no manipulation, no Enron, nothing, electricity prices were going to go up. The input cost skyrocketed.
But there was also a physical bottleneck, wasn't there? Something called Path 15.
Path 15. It sounds like a secret military base or something.
It does.
But it's actually a transmission corridor. It's the main set of wires connecting Northern California to Southern California.
And it was clogged.
It hadn't been upgraded in years. It could only push about 3,900 megawatts south. It acted like a funnel. So even if there was spare power in the north, they physically couldn't shove it down the wires to the south fast enough.
So we have high demand, no new plants, expensive gas, a drought, and bad wires.
The table is set for a disaster.
But, and this is a huge but for me, I want to look at the numbers in the source material again. The report says California had an installed capacity of 45 gigawatts.
Correct. That's what was on the books.
But the demand, even at the absolute peak of the crisis, was only about 28 gigawatts.
That's the number that stops you in your tracks, isn't it?
If you have 45 and you only need 28, I'm not a math genius, but that seems like plenty of power, a huge buffer.
You should have a massive surplus. You should be exporting power, not having blackouts.
So where was the rest of it? Why were the lights going out?
That gap, that missing 17 gigawatts between the 45 they had and the 28 they needed, that is where the crime happened. That gap is where the villains of the story stepped in.
Okay, let's get into section 3, gaming the system. Because this is where the story turns from an unfortunate series of events into basically a heist.
Enter Enron.
The smartest guys in the room.
Or so they thought. And it wasn't just Enron, but they were the ringleaders. We have to understand the mindset here. These traders didn't view electricity as a public service.
No.
They didn't see it as something grandmothers needed to run their oxygen tanks. They saw it as a commodity, like pork bellies or orange juice futures, just numbers on a screen.
There is this quote from the Enron CEO, Kenneth Lay. He's on a call with the chairman of the California Power Authority.
It's infamous. It's so arrogant. He basically mocked the state. He called them crazy people in California.
Wow.
And he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, no matter what the crazy people in California did, I have people working for me at Enron that can figure out a way to make money off of it.
It's that arrogance. We are smarter than you, and we will take your money.
And they did. We have the Enron tapes. These were recorded conversations between traders. And when you listen to them or read the transcripts, it's chilling. They are openly gloating.
They're laughing about it.
They are laughing. There's one part where they're cheering about a wildfire, a literal forest fire, because they knew it would take down a transmission line, which would spike the price, and they would all make a bonus.
That is just sickening.
It is. And they developed these specific strategies to game the market. And because they were essentially frat boys in suits, they gave them these cool names.
Right, the gaming strategies. Let's walk through these, because this is the mechanics of the heist. We have Fat Boy, Death Star, Black Widow, Get Shorty, Bigfoot.
It sounds like the lineup for an erratic superhero team, or supervillain team, I guess.
Definitely supervillain. So let's start with megawatt laundering, also known as ricochet. This one seems directly tied to that price cap we talked about.
Right. Remember, the price inside California was capped for the utilities, but imported power was treated differently to encourage neighbors to help out. So Enron would buy electricity in California at the lower capped price, let's say $50.
Okay, so they own a megawatt of power in San Diego.
Then, on paper, they would export it. They'd schedule it to go to Oregon.
So it leaves the state.
Then another trader, sometimes sitting at the desk right next to them, would buy it in Oregon and sell it back into California as imported power.
And since it's imported,
no price cap. They could sell it for $500. They took California's own power, washed it across the border, and sold it back to them at a 1,000% markup.
ricochet. It bounces out and comes back expensive.
Exactly. They were laundering electrons.
What about economic withholding? That sounds like a boring economics term, but in practice, it was brutal.
This was the primary way they created that artificial gap we talked about. They would simply refuse to sell power.
But can they just do that?
They would claim maintenance or technical difficulties. So it's the middle of a heat wave, demand is peaking, and suddenly an Enron-owned plant calls up and says, oh, sorry, our plant needs to go offline for unexpected repairs.
So they artificially lower the supply to create a panic.
Exactly. The grid operator sees the supply dropping and gets desperate. They start bidding higher and higher just to keep the lights on. Enron waits until the price hits the absolute ceiling, and then, miraculously, the plant is fixed and they sell the power.
So they create the emergency to profit from the rescue.
Precisely. It's market manipulation 101.
And then there's the Death Star. That is the most ominous name of the bunch.
And the most complex. This one was all about gaming the transmission lines themselves.
The traffic jams we've talked about.
Right. So the grid has physical limits. If you try to push too much power through a line, it melts. So the grid operator will actually pay companies a fee to not send power if a line is congested. It's called a congestion relief fee.
Okay, that makes sense. You pay people to back off to save the wires.
So Enron would intentionally schedule massive amounts of power to move in a direction they knew was already full. They would create a fake traffic jam on paper.
They would book the lane knowing it was already closed.
The grid computer would see this and say, alert, congestion, we need to pay someone to relieve this, and it would automatically pay Enron to not send the power.
But here's the kicker, right?
The kicker is that Enron often didn't even have the power they were scheduling in the first place.
Wash.
They were scheduling phantom power to create phantom congestion to get paid real money to relieve it.
So they were getting paid to not do something they couldn't do anyway.
It was pure arbitrage of the rules. The FERC report later called the market inherently gameable.
Inherently gainable. That's some very polite government speak for totally broken and corrupt.
And the result was that wholesalers were selling power at up to 20 times the normal value. It was a feeding frenzy.
So, Section 4. The crisis unfolds. We have the trap set, the shortage is now real, or at least feels real, and the sharks are circling. Now let's watch the ship go down.
It starts in the summer of 2000, June 14th. A massive heat wave hits the Bay Area. 97,000 customers lose power.
That must have been a shock. I mean, rolling blackouts weren't really a thing in America in the 90s, you know.
It was absolutely stunning, but the real panic started in San Diego.
Why San Diego specifically?
So San Diego Gas and Electric SDG&E was in a unique position. They had actually managed their finances better than the other utilities. They had paid off their stranded costs early.
So they were released from the deal.
They were released from the retail price cap. They were the first to be fully deregulated.
Oh boy, so when the wholesale prices went crazy.
The San Diego customers felt it immediately. In August 2000, electricity bills in San Diego doubled. Just boom, doubled. Then they tripled.
I can't even imagine opening your mail. Your bill is usually $100, and now it's $250 or $300.
People revolted. I mean, literally, there were protests in the streets. People were burning their utility bills in public. Small businesses, restaurants, dry cleaners were closing because they couldn't pay for electricity. It was political poison.
And this brings us to Governor Gray Davis. He's sitting up in Sacramento watching San Diego burn.
The Gray Davis problem.
Oh.
And he was completely paralyzed. He saw what was happening in San Diego, voter anger, and he decided, I cannot let that happen to the rest of the state.
So he refused to lift the price caps for PG&E and Edison.
He protected the consumers in LA and San Francisco from the immediate price spike, but by doing that, he basically doomed the utilities.
Because the utilities were still stuck buying power at that 800% markup.
Right. Treasury officials and economists were screaming at Davis. They were saying, you have to raise rates. If you raise rates, people will use less power. Demand will drop, and the wholesale price will come down.
It's the price signal. If power is expensive, I turn off the AC.
Exactly. But Davis feared political suicide, so he kept the caps, and the utilities just bled to death. By December 2000, wholesale prices were up 800%. The utilities were paying up to 50 cents per kilowatt hour, but were only allowed to sell it for 6 or 7 cents.
You can't make that math work. Not for long.
You absolutely cannot. In April 2001, the inevitable happened. Pacific Gas and Electric filed for bankruptcy.
One of the biggest companies in America. Shit. Bust.
And while the money was running out, the grid was physically collapsing. Winter 2000 into spring 2001, we started hitting stage 3 alerts.
And that means reserves are below 3%.
It means you are driving on the highway at 70 miles an hour and your gas light is flashing. You are moments from stalling out.
And they did stall out.
They did. March 19th and 20th, 2001 were the dark days.
Yep.
1.5 million customers lost power.
1.5 million, that's huge.
And then again in May, it really felt like the state was falling apart. Traffic lights out means car accidents. Elevator stopping means fire rescues. It was absolute chaos.
Okay, let's talk about the political fallout. Section 5. Because when the lights go out, Voters want a head on a platter.
And Gray Davis was the main course. His popularity absolutely tanked, and he was getting hit from both sides of the aisle.
From the left, you had people like Arianna Huffington.
Right. The critique from the left was that Davis was too cozy with the energy companies. They said he waited too long to crack down on the manipulators because he was taking campaign contributions from them. They wanted him to seize the power plants, nationalize them.
And from the right.
The critique from the right was that he interfered too much. They said the price caps were the problem. If he had just let the market work, even if it was painful for consumers in the short term, the crisis would have burned itself out much faster.
But Davis tried to fix it with those long-term contracts. And that became a huge and very negative part of his legacy.
It was a total desperation move. The utilities were bankrupt, so the state of California itself stepped in to buy the power. And Davis signed these massive long-term contracts with the generators to guarantee supply.
But he signed them at the absolute peak of the market.
It's like panic buying toilet paper for $50 a roll. He locked in those insane crisis-level prices for 10 years.
Wow.
So California consumers were paying a crisis surcharge on their bills long, long after the crisis was over.
And all this anger, all this frustration, it opened the door for a very famous replacement.
The Terminator.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
But there is a detail in the sources that I found fascinating. An Arnold connection during the crisis before he was even running for governor.
Yes, this is a scene right out of a movie. It's May 2001, the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. Very swanky. Arnold Schwarzenegger and the former LA mayor, Richard Riordan, are having a meeting. And who walks in?
Ken Lay.
The CEO of Enron.
The villain himself.
Enron presented what they called a comprehensive solution to Arnold.
What was the solution?
Essentially, make the investigations go away. Enron wanted the political heat to stop. They wanted the federal and state investigations into their trading practices to end. And in exchange, they implied they could help stabilize the market.
It's basically extortion. Nice grid you have there. Shame if something were to happen to it.
It shows how incredibly powerful Enron thought they were. They thought they could just negotiate with the future governor to wipe away their fraud.
But it didn't work.
No. By that point, the house of cards was already shaking.
Before we see those cards fall, there is one weird exception in this whole story that we have to mention. Los Angeles.
Ah, yes. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. LADWP.
While the rest of the state was in the dark, LA kept the lights on. How? Why?
This is the great irony of the whole situation. LADWP is a government-owned municipal utility.
So they weren't part of the deregulation law?
They were exempt. They kept their old-school vertical monopoly structure. They own their power plants, they own their lines, and they answered to the city council, not to shareholders.
So the inefficient government bureaucracy actually worked better.
Not only did it work better, they profited from the crisis. Because LADWP had excess capacity, they sold their extra power into the state's spot market.
Wait, what?
They were selling power to PG&E and the state at those same inflated, manipulated prices.
The city of LA was playing the shark.
They made millions and millions of dollars off the crisis, and they used that money to keep rates low for their own residents. So if you lived in LA, you were watching the rest of the state burn while your bill stayed flat.
That really challenges the whole narrative that private enterprise is always more efficient.
In this specific case, the public model was the lifeboat.
So how did the nightmare finally end? Section 6. Resolution and justice.
It wasn't one single silver bullet, but the biggest factor was the FERC finally doing its job.
The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Yeah.
For a long time, they were just sitting on their hands.
They were ideologically paralyzed. They believed in the sanctity of the free market. Their leadership kept saying, we can't intervene, the market will correct itself. But by June 2001, the evidence of manipulation was undeniable. The state was bleeding to death.
So they stepped in.
They instituted hard price caps across the entire Western market. They basically said, you cannot charge more than X dollars for a megawatt, period.
And what happened?
The volatility vanished overnight.
It's almost like the shortage wasn't real.
Exactly. Once the incentive to manipulate the price was gone, once they couldn't make 20 times the normal value, the generators suddenly found enough power to sell. All those plants that needed maintenance were suddenly fixed.
The weather helped too, right?
Yes. The drought eased up in the Pacific Northwest, and honestly, Californians did an amazing job at conservation. People really did turn off their lights and appliances when asked. Demand dropped significantly.
And then the giant fell. Enron.
December 2001. Enron filed for bankruptcy. Now, that was mostly due to their accounting fraud, the mark-to-market scandals, and hiding debt, but the California crisis was a huge part of their unraveling. It put a national spotlight on them and their culture of corruption.
What about Justice for California? Did they ever get the money back?
Some of it. But it was a long, painful road. The FERC launched the gaming case and the refund case. These lawsuits dragged on for over a decade.
I saw a note about a settlement as late as 2013.
Yeah, PowerX. That's a Canadian utility. 12 years after the crisis, they agreed to refund $750 million for bad behavior.
But the total damage?
The best estimates are between $40 and $45 billion in economic damage.
You can sue for refunds on overcharges, but you can't get that lost economic growth back.
No, that money is just gone. It was a massive wealth transfer from California consumers to energy traders in Houston and elsewhere.
So let's wrap this up. What does this all mean? Because we are still debating energy grids today. We have Texas freezing over. We have renewables coming online. This isn't just a history lesson.
It's extremely relevant. I think the first major takeaway is that electricity is unique. It is not a normal commodity.
It's not shoes. It's not lemons.
Exactly. You can't store it easily in large amounts. You can't choose not to buy it. If the price of shoes goes to $1,000, I go barefoot. If the price of electricity goes to $1,000, I pay it or I die in the heat.
It's essential for life.
S. David Freeman, who was the expert brought in to clean up the mess for the California Power Authority, had this powerful quote. He said, "Any system that can be gamed will be gamed."
That is the golden rule of regulation.
And he also said, electricity is a public good that must be protected from private abuse. You cannot just throw it to the wolves and hope the market plays nice.
The second takeaway seems to be about the design itself. You can't half-ass deregulation.
Correct. Partial deregulation is worse than no deregulation. You cannot uncap the sellers but cap the buyers. That fundamental disconnect divorced the price signal from the consumer. It blinded the market to reality until the entire system broke.
And finally, the role of private interests. Enron proved that a corporation, if left unchecked, will ruthlessly exploit a broken system, even if it harms millions of people.
They weren't evil in a cartoon sense. They were just maximizing profit within the rules or the lack of rules that existed. If you leave a loophole that allows a trader to make $1 million by shutting down a plant, they will shut down the plant. It's inevitable.
It's a sobering story. But before we go, I want to leave the listener with a final thought, a bit of a what if.
Go for it.
So the International Energy Agency did an analysis of this crisis, and they estimated that during the peak of the blackouts, if demand had been lowered by just 5%.
Just 5%, that's not much.
Just 5%, the price of electricity would have dropped by 50%.
Wow, that is a staggering statistic.
It shows the insane leverage of the margin. When the system is tight, a tiny reduction in demand saves everything.
It really makes you think. We focus so much on the supply side, building more plants, drilling for more gas, but the real power is on the demand side. If we had better ways to just slightly dial back our usage during peaks, we could avoid these crises entirely.
And in an era of AI, electric vehicles, and massive data centers, our demand is about to skyrocket again. Are we walking into another capacity trap?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Are we smarter now, or are we just waiting for the next Death Star?
Let's hope we learned our lesson. Thanks for listening to this deep dive on the California electricity crisis. Stay curious, read the fine print, and maybe turn off the lights when you leave the room.
See you next time.